Thank you very much for that very generous introduction, Dean Moore. Members of the faculty, of the administration, members of the board of directors, of trustees of Fairleigh Dickinson University, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here, and indeed I'm honored to be here to speak to you a little bit about two topics that are in many ways near and dear to my heart. The Rothman Institute is focused on entrepreneurship, something that we know a little bit about at Cognizant, and this is the lecture series on innovation, something that I think we also know a little bit about. So I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about entrepreneurship and innovation in this era of tremendous uncertainty. We have an hour together, and I hope over that period of time I can tell you a little bit about some of the things that we've done over the past 17 years at Cognizant, and maybe along the way have some fun. I want to keep it simple. I'll speak for maybe about 30-40 minutes and then open it up to questions, and hopefully we can have a bit of a dialogue at the end. And I want to keep it relatively simple. All I want to do is tell you our story. It's a relatively simple story of how we built a company over 17 years and some of the decisions we made along the way as we did that. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about the company and then spend a little bit of time on the history of the company and tell you how some simple innovations along the way helped us to build a rather substantial organization. I'll start with just some basic facts about who we are. As was said, this year the company will do about $6.1 billion of revenue. We've grown every year revenue in excess of 30% on a compound annual growth rate. Today the company is about 130,000 employees worldwide. And as the Dean said, we're on the Fortune 500 list, Barron's list, and Financial Times just named us one of the world's largest companies by market cap. So I don't put this up to boast about the company, simply to say that, or to demonstrate what's possible with a little bit of innovation and a few years of time. What do we do as a company? It's very simple. We think that we just simply help our clients build stronger businesses. It's a very easy way to think about what we do. We wake up every morning and our folks go to work saying, how do we help our clients make their businesses stronger? We do that through three sets of broad activities. Management consulting, so we help our clients think about or plan what they need to do. We do it through information technology. We build systems, we put in computers, all focused on helping our clients improve their business results. We wake up every morning saying, how can technology help our clients do better? And then we run and operate their businesses. We run the technology, we run the business processes. So plan, building, and operating, all focused around technology. It's relatively simple, and that's what we do day in and day out. We do it at scale, and perhaps that's where the complexity comes in. We serve some of the largest and most sophisticated clients in the world. If you look at the industries that we serve, we tend to serve a very small number of clients, but we serve them very, very deeply. Across the industries that we serve the biggest, the most sophisticated clients in the world. As an example, 27 out of the top, here in New Jersey, where many of the pharmaceutical companies are headquartered, 27 of the top 30 largest life sciences companies in the world are clients of ours, and so on and so forth. 6 out of the top 10 banks, and if you go around this chart, across the world, the largest and most sophisticated clients in the industries we serve tend to be clients of ours. And we've had a good run. This chart shows you how the revenue of the company has grown over 17 years. The last quarter we announced a $1.6 billion of revenue, so we've done well. And again, I put this up to show what's the state of the possible when innovation and entrepreneurship come together in an era of uncertainty. One of the aspects that makes Cognizant an exciting place, I think, is that we have a very, very, very global and rapidly growing workforce. As I said, we've got 130,000 employees around the world. Those people are located in 54 cities around the world, in 40 countries. We recruit aggressively. In fact, We did the math recently, and looking back over the last 12 months, just to put it into perspective, we hired 20 people every hour of every business day on average, just to give you a sense of the scale at which we are and the complexity of our business. We're recruiting aggressively around the world, here in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, really going anywhere in the world where we can find the best talent in the world. For when you try to solve your clients' toughest business problems, you need the best minds, and so we go anywhere in the world where those minds are available to us. But importantly, in today's world, given how distributed our folks are, 130,000 people, 130,000 minds around the world, it's really important for us to keep those folks connected together. And so we've built very sophisticated technology, which I'll talk a lot about in a minute, to keep all of our people around the world connected together so that even though we're distributed around 40 countries around the world, we are one team, we behave like one team, and if there's a client that has a problem in Beijing, and that's the solution to that problem resides with somebody who's done that similar work in Buenos Aires, we can put those things together seamlessly, the need and the mind. So in summary, just very quickly, as a background to what I'd like to talk about, our business is one it's a very, very knowledge-driven business. The business is all about the knowledge that resides within the company and the minds of our people. We serve the most demanding clients. We're growing revenue very quickly. We've got a very rapidly growing workforce that's globally distributed around the world. You put all of that together, and what that gives you is a picture of a large enterprise, perhaps, but it gives you a picture of some tremendous complexity. There's a lot of complexity here to deal with. Some people say to me, Frank, how do you just the task of hiring 20 people every hour of every day and bringing those folks on must be extraordinarily daunting. And I say, yes, but that's only one aspect of what we do. When you think about the complexity of everything else that we do, it can appear quite significant. But I want to talk about complexity and uncertainty because certainly the world is today a much more complex and demanding place, perhaps more so than it's ever been. But I'd like to make the case to you that while complexity to some might mean ripping your hair out like my friend here on the slide, the complexity is also a great source of opportunity. Complexity to me, I think innovation and complexity are perhaps like a hero and his sidekick. You have where you have one, perhaps the other is inevitably there. And so while complexity, sometimes when we wake up in the morning and we read the newspaper and we look at the uncertainty in the world and the complexity that we face, we might have a tendency to become glum about it. I wake up every morning and look at the uncertainty and I look at the complexity and say, wow, these are great opportunities for innovation and great opportunities to do things differently. And indeed, we face great challenges. We face great challenges at all levels, whether you look at the big global problems that we face around climate change, around water shortage, around human population growth, mega cities. We have large global challenges that we must deal with as a world. We've got significant challenges and uncertainties at the economic level. We read the papers every morning, what's going on in Europe, what happened in the United States over the last 4 years, significant issues as economies around the world try to deal with growing debt burdens and so on and so forth. We have uncertainty and complexity at the political level, not only what's depicted here in terms of what happened in the Arab world and is happening and unfolding in the Arab world over the last few years, but equally at home in our own country here in the United States, where we see significant turmoil in the political environment. And finally, we've got tremendous social unrest. All of this is creating social unrest, things like the Occupy Wall Street movement. All of these create complexity and uncertainty. And the uncertainty and complexity is not limited to the world and governments and closer to home. Businesses face tremendous uncertainty and complexity. We've been talking to our clients for quite some time now about four big forces: the forces of globalization, the forces of virtualization, new technologies like cloud computing, and the millennial generation, which create tremendous opportunity but also tremendous complexity for businesses. So I think we're at a point in history where complexity is manifesting, uncertainty is manifesting itself at all levels. And while that may appear daunting to some, to me there's never been a richer time to be an entrepreneur. There's never been a richer time to be an innovator, because we will not be able to solve the problems that face us with traditional thinking. And in fact, there's a great quote from Albert Einstein that says that we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them. And I think that that is really appropriate for this moment in time. We will not solve the big problems like climate change, like the water shortage that faces us and will face us increasingly. We're in a world where the population is at a level where we've never had it on the globe before. We face unprecedented challenges at all levels. And so this is an opportunity to innovate. I think it's an opportunity for bright minds to do things. And we often at Cognizant have this debate about, well, what really is innovation? And many times innovation is thought of as, in the business world at least, innovation is thought of as the idea of bringing new products and services to market, understanding what's going on in the marketplace, sensing and responding to changes in your business environment, and being able to create products and services to address those changes and those opportunities. I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about a different kind of innovation, the innovation that we perhaps built Cognizant on, and that is business model innovation, which is taking the way that something was done traditionally and changing it in a way that allows us to do it better, faster, or cheaper perhaps. Many people think about Apple when we think about innovative companies, and Apple is probably the greatest example, or at least in recent memory, of a company that innovates and has innovated in tremendously breakthrough ways. The reality is that Apple's innovation is at least as much around the business model as it was about their great products and services. The iPod, the iPad, many of the products that all of us use on a day-to-day basis are only half the story at Apple, in my view. The other story of what Apple did was it redefined the boundaries of traditional industries. Apple was at one point considered a computer company or a technology company. Today they're a consumer goods company. Today they're a media company. They redefined the business model. And I think that as important as the innovation around products and services, perhaps, is the innovation around the business model and what's possible. And so I want to take you back and talk a little bit about this issue of business model innovation, and use our example of how we innovated the business model to create an organization the organization that Cognizant is today. If I take you to, and I want to use the example of custom software development, because this is what we do every single day. Custom software development is the process of building software that's customized for a particular client or a particular need. So this isn't the software that you might use, that you might buy from Microsoft, which is produced once for many, many users. This is very custom kind of software. And if you go back many, many years, custom software development was done in a fashion like this. And it's not important what those boxes say, just to know that it was done in a sort of sequential fashion, one step after the other. And software development is an activity that requires a lot of knowledge. We think of it as the know how, know what, know where, and know who. You have to know who your users are. You have to know how to be able to build the software. You have to know what the purpose of the software is, and so on and so forth. And 40 or 50 years ago, software was built using this very linear model. And the result of that was that it was most often built very close to where the users of the software was. So if you looked at the world map, software was built where the users were. So here I've given an example of, if you had to build a system in Phoenix, or you had to build for users in Phoenix, or software for users in Amsterdam, you'd go there and you'd build the software very locally. And then somebody said, about 20 years ago or 30 years ago, actually probably more like 40 years ago now, sorry. Somebody said, you know what? Why do we have to do it that way? Why can't we move some of those activities to other parts of the world? And that was the first sort of evolution of the software development lifecycle, where some of these activities started to move to other parts of the world. The problem was 40 years ago that blue area in the middle of the slide was that interaction costs were very, very high. When you moved software to other parts of the world, The cost of communications was very high. Bandwidth wasn't very easily available. I remember even 20 or 25 years ago, if you went to parts of the world like India, you looked at the rest of the world through a very, very small, narrow aperture because there just wasn't a lot of bandwidth, there wasn't a lot of communications available. There was a lot of what I think of as interaction costs, friction, to make this model work. And so this was a great innovation, and folks built software like this for many years. And that's sort of around the time when a bunch of us who eventually went on to start Cognizant sat around a table and we looked at the industry and we said, today the industry is such that it's very simple. If software needs to get built for a client in a client in Amsterdam or in Phoenix, there might be one other location somewhere in India where the software is getting built, but it's relatively simplistic. But that was the state of the industry back in 1993 or 1994, and a group of companies had established themselves well doing this. They were known for operational excellence. They were known for the software engineering discipline. And we sat and we looked at the model, and we looked at it hard, and we realized that in fact that was a too narrow a lens through which to look at or rather too small an aperture to look at the industry through, because we also realized that there was this other group of companies that were doing software development in the more traditional way, and they were known for having very strong relationships with their clients, having very deep knowledge of the industries that their clients were in, having very, very strong project and program management capabilities. But these were two separate firms, and we looked at this, and in a moment of perhaps innovation, we said, why does it have to be separate? Why is it that the world has these two sets of firms? And we created a firm, and we set out to create a firm that was in the middle of these two, that gave our clients the best of both worlds. And that simple innovation, that simple insight into a business model that had traditionally been taken for granted, is what has propelled Cognizant over 17 years. The simple idea that we could take these two groups of companies, essentially the best of both worlds, put them together and create a different business model that perhaps nobody else had thought about. So innovation can come in very, very simple ways and create significantly breakthrough results. And this is an example at Cognizant of how we did it with the business model. We innovated the business model, we changed it, and I think over the years have created some considerable value as a result of that. So what happened? How did it play out? As we built Cognizant, our model started to look a lot more like this. And again, the boxes are not important, only to say that activity started to move around the world. We realized that you could actually move things quite seamlessly around the world. And what happened was that blue layer in the middle, the one I talked to you about on my previous slide, started to collapse. Interaction costs started to come down. A bunch of things made it cheaper, more efficient, more effective to collaborate. And as that happened, more things started to move around the world. Activities could be broken up into smaller and smaller pieces and moved globally around the world. And so that map that we had before that I showed you changed. Today, this is what our map looks like. Stuff gets produced anywhere in the world, it gets delivered anywhere else in the world, and it happens very, very seamlessly. The model has evolved to the place where, because of that simple innovation that we had to position the company between these two established groups of companies, we've enabled this to happen. We've enabled work to move seamlessly around the world to wherever it makes most sense for that work to be performed. A big part of that was driven by changes in technology. And that's the other message that I have, which is that when you're in a world of uncertainty, it's really important to think about where's the puck going, and to try to create some options around where the puck is going, not where the puck has been. We realized, as we were having those early discussions 17 or 18 years ago, that interaction costs, the things that were causing friction in the old model, would over time go away. We saw a set of trends that indicated to us that, now, we could never have imagined how fast and how dramatic that shift would have been. but we did know that interaction costs were falling. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. Deregulation and technology changes created this dramatic step function change in the interaction costs. In the early 1990s, that happened as deregulation came in, as telecommunications monopolies around the world became privatized or became subject to competition. It shrunk communications costs considerably. Travel became much easier. In the mid to late 2000s, none of us, when we started the business, could have imagined innovations like the internet and so on. And so when the internet came along and we had fiber everywhere, and we had voice over IP and Skype and those kinds of technologies, and email became more prevalent and so on and so forth, once again we saw this step function change in how the world collaborated. And we think that that's going to continue over the next 5 years. We think we'll move to a world, or our planning assumption is that we'll move to a world where bandwidth is almost free, where communication across all medium, voice, video, will become completely unified, which we're already starting to see. And where new technologies like cloud, mobile, and social computing will allow us to interact in ways that perhaps in the future I'll deliver this lecture to you completely virtually. We won't need to be physically together in a room, and we'll have the same quality of experience as though we were sitting around in one room. The way we interact in the future is going to be dramatically different than it's ever been. And so as we think about this, we have this mindset of that communication and collaboration costs, if you will go to zero. They will be free, essentially. And when that happens, we think that it will take what we do to a whole different level. As we look back, the internet was a really key enabler of all of this. We think Web 2.0 or Web 3.0, the new generation of technologies that are finding their way to the internet, will take this to a whole different level, a whole new level, whether it's desktop video conferencing, whether it's unified communications, whether it's seamless messaging. We think that all of these things will, and social networking, of course, all of these things will drive collaboration costs and interaction costs down to zero. And this will make knowledge work of all kinds be delivered very, very seamlessly, again, from any part of the world to any part of the world in a completely seamless way. So when we think about the future, we think that we'll see a world where knowledge work, anything any work that is primarily produced by knowledge workers, will become delinked from geography at very, very atomic levels. What I mean by that is that the work will get divided into small sub-processes, and those sub-processes will be done anywhere in the world where the right talent exists for that work. In fact, work, in a sense, will move to the talent, as opposed to our old paradigm where talent moved to work. The opposite will happen. And that's already increasingly starting to happen, and will continue to happen. As a result of that, geographic boundaries will disappear, because problems, by definition, will no longer be optimally solved within single geographic boundaries. By definition, the best minds to solve a particular problem will be geographically distributed around the world, and therefore the optimal solution for a problem will be one that's distributed around the world. So we'll see this notion of problem solving happening on a global scale. We're already starting to see this happen quite significantly. Some of you may have heard of things like the Netflix challenge, where Netflix put a particularly difficult problem on the internet and invited innovators from around the world to come in and present solutions to that problem. So we're starting to see that happen increasingly already, and we think it'll happen even further. And as a result of that, knowledge will move seamlessly across the globe. It used to be the case that knowledge was confined very much to geographic or local concentrations and pools of knowledge. That will change significantly, and has already changed. Knowledge has become significantly more mobile as connectivity and its interaction costs go to zero. So when we think about that map and we think about the future, we think that the map will look something like this in the future. We think that, in fact, every country, every city, every individual at an individual level will be able to participate in the global knowledge ecosystem. And so that's going to require radically new levels of coordination and collaboration. It's tough today with 40 cities around the world. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult when our map looks like this, which we think it will over time. And so we're investing very heavily at Cognizant in building an orchestration system that can hold all of this together. We call this Cognizant 2.0. I alluded to it briefly earlier on. But Cognizant 2.0 in many ways is the glue that holds us together. It's a real-time operating system that allows us to take work, break it into multiple small atomic pieces, parse that work out anywhere in the world, have people work on that and bring it back seamlessly and reassemble it to deliver it to a client. It's got knowledge management built into it, so we can solve the know-how problem. It's got process orchestration built into it so that we can orchestrate complicated processes and make sure that the right things happen in the right sequence. And it's also got real-time governance so that we can watch and make sure that things are happening when they're supposed to happen, how they're supposed to happen within the service levels that we've agreed with the client, and we can bring it all back together. It's been a significant investment that we've made over the years, but it allows us to create the glue that holds us all together. So that's a quick story, quick recap of the Cognizant story. I'll just wrap up by saying that all of this is, it's an interesting story. I think we've done a few things over the years that have been unique and different, but it all started with that simple innovation. It all started with that one day when we sat around a table and we said, what is it about the way that business is done today? What is it about the uncertainty that our clients face that we can capitalize upon? And from there came this enterprise. I'd like to just finish up with a couple of thoughts. When we tend to think about technology companies, and I ask folks, who are the tech companies that you know most about? People tend to talk to me about Google and Apple and Facebook. And I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about the results that we've been able to show. And again, I do this to show what's possible when you innovate relative to some of those companies. If you compare us with Google on shareholder return, since their IPO, Google's returned about 500%. If you invested in Google in their IPO, you'd have about a 500% return on your investment. If you invested in Cognizant at our IPO, you'd have about a 16,000% return on investment. Now, that's perhaps an unfair comparison because we've been public a little longer than Google, but nevertheless gives you a sense of the state of the possible. If you compare us to Apple on an important, what for a public company CEO is an important measure, and you look at how many consecutive quarters Apple has exceeded the expectations of their investors, that number is about 35. If you look at Cognizant, that number is about 52. We're the only company in the S&P 500 that's had more consecutive quarters of beating our investors' expectations than Apple. So a tremendous track record. And the final one that perhaps to me was most interesting is that in this economic environment where we talk about high levels of unemployment, companies like Facebook are often viewed as real growth drivers or employment drivers. If you look at the rate at which Facebook hires for their operations, we're hiring at a rate that's about 20 times greater than Facebook's rate. So again, I thought I would put that into some perspective, not to talk about the Cognizant story so much as to tell you what's the state of the possible and why innovation and entrepreneurship are so important. A parting thought, people often tell me that they're scared given the current environment. People tell me that the current environment is daunting. This is one of my favorite quotes. I say to people, I don't understand why you're frightened of new ideas. I'm really frightened of the old ones because we won't survive with our old ideas. So I want to just finish up by thanking all of you for the opportunity to be here. It truly is an honor to address all of you and to be invited to participate in the lecture series. And I'd be happy to open it up and take any questions.
Thank you. Most of you know the routine. Raise your hand, wait for the mic, keep the questions very short so we can get as many in as possible.
Hey, Frank, given your, right here.
Sorry, oh, there we are, sorry.
Given your growth, both geographically and headcount-wise, could you talk a little bit about things that you've done to preserve the culture of innovation?
No, it's great. It's a great question. And, you know, one of the things that new employees tell us when they join Cognizant is that this is the biggest startup that they've ever been in. Even at 130,000 people, the culture is still very much that of a startup, and it's very entrepreneurially driven company. And we wanted to preserve that. We would not be able to grow at the pace that we're growing if we didn't preserve that culture of entrepreneurship. And so we've very deliberately done a number of things to decentralize, to push accountability down into the organization. You know, I tell our employees and our managers that my job is to sort of set the direction, create an environment, and then get the hell out of their way so that they can do what they need to do. When you hire the best and the brightest in the world, you can't run it centrally. You've got to let them do what they want to do. That's why they come and work for you every day. So we've really worked to push, empower, decentralized responsibility, obviously in a prudent way, keeping the right sets of controls in place where necessary and so on and so forth, but really making sure that folks come in every morning and say, you know what, this is a place where they allow us to do the best work that we can, because that's what bright people want to do. And in the end, if you do that, everything else follows.
My work focuses on talent issues in both U.S. and India. I'm curious, with the rate of hiring you're doing and the pushing of the transaction cost almost zero, what you see as the implications, both here in New Jersey and the U.S. for employment and wages, but also in India, where you're experiencing tremendous growth, but also there are real challenges with the quality of the education system and its ability to meet those needs.
To answer that question, you sort of have to look short, medium, and long term, because I think the answer and the implications and the issues are different depending on the short, the medium, and the long term. The reality is both India and the U.S. at some levels have the same problem. We've got a skills mismatch. In the United States, while unemployment is at over 9% or whatever it is, the reality is in the skills that I'm hiring for, unemployment is in the very low single digits. According to the Department of Labor, IT professionals or software professionals, unemployment is 5%. If you look at electrical engineers, who we also hire, it's even lower. It's 3.7%. So for the kinds of skills that I'm hiring in the United States, there just isn't the right talent. The jobs are here, the talent isn't. We're not producing scientists and engineers in enough volume and quantity in the United States as we need. And frankly, our immigration system in the United States is also discourages folks from coming here, highly skilled folks who come to university to stay, and also folks who want to come to this country. So there's a skills mismatch here. We have the same problem in India in a different way. In India, the university system is fantastic, but it's been strained given the volume and the growth of that economy. And so, in a sense, the graduates we're producing in India now need some significant amount of supplemental work after they come to us. So when a fresh graduate comes to us in India in particular, we spend 3 to 6 months of retraining before we make them productive on a client engagement. So it gives you a sense of, so at the macro level, the problem's actually very, very similar. And by the way, you can look at this issue and you see very similar dynamics across the world. We hire not just in the US and India, we hire in China, we hire in the Philippines, we're hiring in Eastern Europe, and you see very similar dynamics. I think what the implication of all of this is that the world will become increasingly specialized along talent lines. Countries around the world and even cities around the world will start to establish core competencies, talent core competencies. You see this happening in India. You have certain cities in India that are better known for particular areas, whether those are technology areas, whether those are industry specializations. Parts of India are very, very good. There's a lot of financial services talent, and they're becoming financial services hubs. Other parts of India are becoming high-tech hubs, and so on and so forth. And so I think you'll start to see that more and more across the world. And within that ecosystem, I think that the United States has probably one of the, not probably, in fact, unambiguously today the best innovation ecosystem in the world, and I think that that will continue to be the case for a very, very long time. A big part of that innovation ecosystem is institutions like this one, the academic institutions that, again, without doubt are amongst the best in the world. And so I think the United States will continue to be the innovation engine for the rest of the world for a very, very long time.
In reaching out across the world to build this knowledge base of knowledgeable people, how do you address training in terms of ageism, sexism, chauvinism in terms of your country, that type of thing? Because in order to collaborate successfully, you need to overcome those barriers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we emphasize first and foremost the Cognizant culture. The Cognizant culture is a culture of meritocracy. It's a culture of equal opportunity. It's a culture of entrepreneurship and innovation. It's a culture, by definition, we're a young company. The average age at Cognizant is under 30. So we have a lot of millennials in our workforce. And so first and foremost, our emphasis is on the aspects of the Cognizant culture. And we do a lot of training around the culture at Cognizant. And what we find is that implicit in the culture at Cognizant, when we talk about meritocracy, when we talk about equal opportunity, many of the national culture issues then become subsumed in that. It becomes a process almost of self-selection. People who understand the Cognizant culture around the world and that culture resonates with them self-select into Cognizant, and those that don't tend not to stay very long in the company. No, I didn't say that at all. I just said that, that's an attribute of our...
In my financial services, I've heard a lot about people over 50 going on a job interview and being told that it's a young company, which meaning they're not welcome there.
I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, at Cognizant we've got a very, broad distribution of folks. The average age at Cognizant is under 30. That's just the demographic of who we are. We hire...
Training to hire people.
Sorry?
What is the training? Like, you have specific training, like about diversity and hiring?
We absolutely do. We hire across the world, and we're committed to being an equal opportunity employer. But the reality is that in any year, 60 or 70% of our employment comes from campuses, from college campuses, and so that creates a demographic and a workforce where we have a young workforce. That's the reality of our business.
Just from a scaling perspective, what kind of things are you doing to scale your business? Because, in services, to grow revenue, you grow headcount, but, there's going to be a limit, I guess, into that. What are the things you're thinking of?
Yeah, I think that in the services business, you'll always have some degree of linearity with the business. There are a number of linearity being the correlation between revenue and headcount. That's just the nature of the business. There are a number of things that we're doing as we start to look for what we think of as more nonlinear revenue opportunities. And there's lots of models out there around being more, focusing more on intellectual property and licensing of intellectual property and those kinds of things. But the reality is that for a very long period of time, the bulk of our revenue is going to be tied to headcount, and we like that model. So we'll continue to look for nonlinear sources of revenue, but for the next 5-10 years, we're still going to have large headcount to revenue correlation, and that's fine. That's just part of the business model. We will learn to, and we have learned how to do that.
In one of your slides, you mentioned about the, sort of almost looks like a star cast of client companies who were either top, 2 out of the top 5 or whatever, 5 out of top 10 or whatever it was the case. Could you speak to the extent to which your client companies drive the innovation process within Cognizant, and to what extent is the innovation process within Cognizant independent of the client companies?
That's a great question. You know, you have to look at innovation from, I think it's, you know, there are multiple different perspectives and dimensions. When we think about innovation at Cognizant, the bulk of our innovation, like perhaps many firms, is around this notion of how do we continue to be creative on the products and services that we're taking to our clients. One of the other points I made when I talked about our client base is that we tend to serve a small number of clients. And that's been our approach from day one. We try to focus on the largest and most sophisticated clients. But the corollary of that approach is that when you serve a small number of clients, you also have to continue to innovate deeply, because your growth relies upon taking new products and services to that limited client base year over year. If you don't innovate and you don't have new products and services, you stagnate. So one part of the innovation equation at Cognizant is the process of how we develop new products and services that we take to clients. And that process is heavily client-driven. We spend a lot of time systematically understanding where our clients are headed, and therefore what are the products and services that we can create to help them achieve their business agenda. And so that's both formally and informally a very, very structured process where we go through this, things like having clients come and participate at our board meeting, all the way down to far more granular opportunities to understand the voice of the client. The other aspect of innovation, though, is our clients innovating in their markets. So in other words, if we're serving an insurance company, what are they doing to be more relevant to their customers? That tends to be more client-led. We support that tremendously, but that's more of a joint Cognizant client activity, because the client will come to us and say, look, there's this big opportunity, this trend, this uncertainty in our market. We see it as an opportunity. We need technology, we need business process, we need some management consulting help around framing up that opportunity and taking it to market. So that tends to be much more of a joint initiative.
My question was driven primarily by the fact that if you look at the history of industries, today's top 5 companies, 5 years from now, or whatever, may be completely different. And so while your focus has been primarily on the top 5 companies today, for instance, what about those companies that are likely to be displacing these top 5 companies? And that's where...
Yeah, okay. So you mean in terms of our client base. So look, even though the bulk of our revenue comes from the clients that I talked about here, you'll also see at Cognizant that there's a whole ecosystem of smaller, more emerging companies that we deal with for exactly that reason. Technology companies and end-user client companies. In fact, in the technology space, we've set up a specific business group solely to deal with small emerging businesses. And so what we call the technology vertical at Cognizant is focused purely on, they're based in Silicon Valley, they're focused in the big innovation centers around the world, and they're continually staying in touch. Likewise, with all of the industry groups that we serve, we're also systematically always trying to identify who are the next stars, because as you said, it may not be the folks that are the stars today.
I understand that your business model teaches that you are still a growing, expanding young company. What do you do, both culturally and contractually, if anything, to keep the people you now have from going with the companies headed by the new Frank DeSousa's of the world? And I take it that you have an ongoing educational training program for everyone, so that as they get older, they're not losing the technical advances in education today.
We do very little, if anything, to hold people to Cognizant contractually. We just think that's a losing proposition. Excuse me. Of course, we have we ensure that the folks that serve our clients protect our clients' intellectual property and those kinds of things. But we do very little to have folks sign pieces of paper that say, you'll stay with us, you must stay with us, we don't want you to go somewhere else. So we think that we want to create a culture at Cognizant where people come here because thank you very much, because they like to be here, because they want to stay here, and because we offer them tremendous opportunities for growth, learning, to have fun, to contribute, and to solve some of our clients' most difficult problems. And so that's really the focus. When we talk about, the reality is technology is changing so fast today that we don't hire for skills. We don't think that that's the right thing to do. We hire folks, and our whole culture is about our whole approach is around the opportunities that are available and for individuals to relearn. And we do that while we do an awful lot of training. We train millions and millions of hours a year, every year of training that's delivered. The biggest focus that we have when it comes to developing our people is on rotating them, moving them into new opportunities where they can grow and they can expand. We find that that's the best way to learn. I mean, there's lots of research that shows that classroom training is effective. On-the-job training is equally, if not more effective in professional situations. And so we do a lot of training, but we also focus significantly on rotation. And we think that by rotating, the reality is that, technology skills become obsolete relatively quickly. And so we simply, at the rate at which we're hiring, we're simply not going to be able to succeed by hiring for skills and then hoping that those skills remain relevant forever.
I'm going to take the last, let's say, two questions. The first one is, one of the reasons you're here is because of this article in Fortune in May that says, an outsourcing firm rocks social media. Now with Cognizant 2.0, this is really very impressive stuff. Other companies have been wanting to access this and use it for their own company. And I wanted to just sort of tease this out a little bit. Obviously, this is one of your competitive edges. However, with open innovation, other industries, was there any, or is there any thought of leveraging that as another product, or sharing it, or collaborating?
Yeah, we're not opposed to it, frankly. It's just we haven't got around to it yet because we've got so much else on the plate. The reality is Cognizant 2.0 it's a tremendous competitive differentiator for us, but it's not just about the technology. You could pick up Cognizant 2.0 and you could transfer it to another organization and it could fail miserably, because social media is not just about the technology. In fact, the technology is relatively well understood at this point, the technology of social media. Success in social media is as much about the culture as it is about the technology that you use. And so our success with Cognizant 2.0 wasn't because the technology was unique. It actually probably was when we deployed it 6 or 7 years ago. We were probably on the leading edge at that point. Today, it's probably not. But today, what our competitive advantage is, it goes back to the culture. We've got people who, there's a culture of collaboration, there's a culture of sharing, there's a culture that you help out across organizational boundaries, even if there isn't something that's directly relevant to your day-to-day job. If there's somebody in Beijing that needs a helping hand, you lend a helping hand. There's a culture that says we want to share. Part of Cognizant 2.0 is a blogging system where associates blog. Today, I think the numbers are something like 80 or 90% of Cognizant employees either read the blog or are active commenters on the blog. I mean, we've got just a very rich blogging community, and they blog about anything. It's not about work, it's about, what they did over the weekend, the movie they saw, and they do it because there's this culture of sharing and this culture of collaboration. And by the way, what that does is it creates a tremendous, what I call this virtual water cooler, where 130,000 people are gathered around a water cooler periodically during the day. And what that does is it allows us to inject questions and ask them questions. So when you get 130,000 people around a water cooler, you can say, hey, by the way, has anybody figured this problem out, or has anybody seen something that looks a little bit like this? And that's the power of Cognizant 2.0. It's the culture as much as it is the technology.
One last question. We have several students in the audience, and several of them are thinking about what courses to take or what to major or minor in. And there has been very well-known folks saying they should learn a computer language or the basics of some computer language. Now, you obviously just mentioned, we all know that technology changes so fast. However, what's your perspective on that? Should there be some basic knowledge? And if so, in what area exactly?
Yeah, I think, look, if I can use my own example, I was a business major, both undergraduate and graduate school. And so I have no formal training in information technology or software, rather. But I taught myself how to program many years ago. I think it's less, and I think that served me very, very well. Because what is true today is that the world is becoming far more technology intensive, not less technology intensive. And programming, while you may never use the programming skill in your career, if you're a student in your career going forward, that may or may not be true. The reality is programming gives you a good way to think about how computers work. And so that's what you'll get from learning a programming language. The language itself may be obsolete 6 months from now, a year from now, or 2 years from now, but the way to think about how computers operate is very well codified in software, and that's something that I think unless you actually sit down in front of a terminal and write code, it's hard to get. So I'd encourage you to do that. Of course, we can always use computer scientists and software engineers, so that helps too.
Great, thank you very much. That was an awesome speech. Appreciate it. I'd like to call up Dean Moore to present you with a small token of our appreciation. As I was thinking about it, Frank didn't mention it, but he co-founded the company. What makes this so special is that most entrepreneurs cannot transition effectively, particularly into a multi-billion-dollar company. And so Frank is probably only one of about 50 million people, 1 in 50 million people who have scaled and transitioned successfully. So he is in the same league as Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and those folks. So he probably wouldn't mention that. I'm mentioning it because he's probably too humble to say that. But the reality is we have someone very special in our midst, and we thank him for coming today. So please accept this plaque from us.
Frank, on behalf of Fairleigh Dickinson University, Silvermorton College of Business, Rothman Institute of Entrepreneurship, all those in attendance today, thanks for providing your insights on innovation, creativity, and uncertainty. And we wish you and Cognizant continued success. Thank you very much.